And then what's your favorite movie and why?
Favorite movie, I think I already said it was 13 Hours in Benghazi. Not only is it an incredible movie of a real, true event that happened, but it also, at the end of the movie, they have all the people they were playing, all the people they were acting as. And some of these people, and every year when Benghazi comes around, I always post the same one. You'll see it on my Instagram because they are my heroes. Those guys are my heroes.
Welcome to the On the Edge podcast with your host, Scott Groves. Hey, ladies and gentlemen, it's Scott Groves with the On the Edge podcast, and today we're talking to my buddy Joey Pena, who, not surprisingly, comes from jiu-jitsu. If you're watching this on video, it's very rare that I'm in a room where I feel super intimidated by the guy sitting across from me, but Joey, especially with his shirt off, looks like a Greek god or a superhero or Henry Cavill. It's really embarrassing, with like the best beard you've ever seen. But we met at jiu-jitsu and then kind of fell in love on Instagram, and I was like, oh, ex-82nd Airborne guy. He owns an executive protection company that I don't really even know what that means other than you do cool stuff in suits and limos and like big black SUVs. So I wanted to talk to him, get to know more about him personally, learn about the executive protection industry, because this whole year we've been talking to business owners from different fields and people that have had to grow their own things. And, you know, we were just talking before you came in here. You're like, oh yeah, it's kind of weird. I run like a multi-million-dollar business from my kitchen table because our deliverable service is out in the field. So I don't need an office or a fancy, storefront. I'm running it from a laptop in my kitchen. So welcome to the podcast, and tell us about what the hell executive protection even is.
Yeah, I fell into it. A lot of guys, when I got out of the military, that was that 2010 era, they were all headed to Afghanistan and Iraq as contractors for companies like DynCorp, Triple Canopy, Blackwater. And so that was a logical progression. For personal reasons, I stayed home and fell into it. I was the guy that was there who got tapped because a tier 1 element guy was leaving an executive protection detail for one of the most affluent individuals. I won't say his name on the air, but he's no longer with us. But for 6 years, I ran his night, what we call affectionately an RST, a residential security team. And that's usually where your day one, week one, first time, beginner EP executive protection agents start. They usually start, watching him sleep. Your principal, that's your client, right?
Making sure nobody breaks into the house or is fucking around.
It's the place you put somebody that needs to have the least supervision and has the least important job. But I did that for 6 years. That's back in the day. That's how they used to filter the agents, so who were going to stay in the industry and who were going to get nudged out and maybe go do something else. Well, while everyone else was doing contracting work, I was doing that. And what's interesting is that nobody stays on the contracting realm for longer than 6 to 12 years. They don't make a career out of it. It's too hard.
Right.
You're away from your family. You're gone for 3 months. You're back for a month. It's too arduous. So I was doing 6 years being what we affectionately call CONUS, Continental United States. I was here, and they were OCONUS outside the Continental United States. And so when they were coming back CONUS, I was already had time in grade. I was already here, had done six years of EP. I had moved to Las Vegas at that point, was trying to get into the Las Vegas executive protection realm. And the entire industry was changing because now you have an influx of people who are coming back from contracting, who have trigger time, who have done serious work, whether it's, dignitary protection, if they were, kicking indoors, or maybe they were doing, secret squirrel stuff. So,
because this is when they're doing it overseas, I kind of picture them Benghazi thing, right? Where they're protecting diplomats and stuff like that.
So Benghazi, I love those guys. And I'll be honest with you, there are a lot of heroes in the United States military. I will tell you, my personal heroes are all those guys. 13 Hours in Benghazi, one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, me too.
Only because those are expats. Those guys were not real serving military guys. They'd already done their time. They'd already quit. They were done. They were now making money for themselves. And they went against orders, went down the street a couple miles to go, knowing that they were going to lose their jobs, that their families were not going to eat. They literally quit their jobs and said, no, I'd rather do the right thing serve my countrymen, go help the AMBO, collect them and bring them back to knowing that they were going to never work in the industry again. And for me, that was the biggest patriotic act that you could ever do. Like, it's one thing to do it because you're under orders. It's quite another knowing you're going to lose so much. And those guys, every single one of them are my personal heroes. And honestly, I get goosebumps every time I talk about that. It's just like, if you served, you understand the importance of what happened during that scrimmage. So yes, those guys, those guys who are usually expats who are getting paid, now they're coming back. And like in 2010, 2015, all that era, all those guys were coming back and they were trying to find jobs that were just as important. And so they looked to a little known industry called executive protection. And it changed the game. The gatekeepers were no longer your tier one elements. The gatekeepers were no longer 20-year law enforcement guys who are now protecting your boxers or, VIPs or whatnot. Now they were these highly trained, have a lot of experience contractors and 82nd guys like me who were just now filtering in the ranks. And what changed and what I believe in is that ongoing training. So you didn't have these guys who were tier one elements, these ground branch dudes, these lethal guys who have training now taking over the ranks. What you had is now these guys who were like me, who were only tier 3 elements, who had combat experience, but now because all those Green Berets, those GBs that were now creating like Sheepdog Defense, who are now creating curriculum training like Green Line and Triple Feed, all these other companies that are incredible who have like tier 1 elements teaching to civilians. These guys who are like me go into a Triple Feed course and take their broken carbine class, and now they have so many of these courses that are stacked. And they do this thing that you and I love called jiu-jitsu.
Right.
And now they're able to be these lethal weapons and you couple that with hospitality, and now they are incredible executive protection agents. Now maybe they're not tier 1, but we don't need them to be tier 1. Now they
explain to the casual listener like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, because I kind of know what you're talking about. And like Mike Glover at Fieldcraft Survival,
right.
I wouldn't say he's a friend, but he's an acquaintance of mine. So I've talked to him about, he's got all the credentials, Green Beret and then CIA Secret Squirrel stuff.
Right.
But when he comes back, he doesn't want to be on like Jeff Bezos' security team.
Correct.
He's got an entrepreneurial vibe like you. He wants to go build a whole training thing.
Correct.
When our dads were our age, there was no such thing as going out into the woods and learning survival, first aid, combat tactics.
Unless you went to Boy Scouts, right?
Yeah, unless you went to Boy Scouts. But from some ex-Navy SEAL, there was no such thing as like, I'm going to go do some weekend warrior training and then go back to my automotive mechanics job, right? So it's so cool that stuff exists just for like preparedness.
Oh, it's so awesome. And I'll get in the tier 1 aspects and talk about what that is. And you'll have to be kind to me because I wasn't ever tier 1. I don't know all the ins and outs, but I have a pretty good understanding of it. But yes, there are companies like Triple Feed, Green Line, you have the Point One Tactics, you have Sheepdog Defense. You have so many good courses that are out there from guys that are just incredible. And now they're putting on this to the common man and people are eating it up. Yeah. And now they're turning themselves into weapons. You couple that with jiu-jitsu. Oh my God. Now you have somebody who's doesn't need to have served in combat. Now you have somebody who has on-the-job training coupled with hospitality, and now they're a lethal executive protection agent.
Hey, this quick interruption is brought to you by me, Scott Groves, the host of the On the Edge podcast. This podcast is brought to you by me. I'm a loan officer who can help you with a mortgage in all 50 states across the United States. I also coach loan officers. So if you are a home buyer who's looking to get a mortgage, if you're a realtor who's looking to partner with an awesome loan officer, or if you're a loan officer looking for coaching, get in touch with me. It's those sources of revenue that allow us to produce this podcast and get out a new episode to you every week for the last couple years. So if you're looking for a mortgage, if you're looking for a mortgage lender to partner with, or you're looking for a mortgage coach, I'm your guy. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
So I just want to touch back to your tier 1. Your tier 1s are typically your DevGru, your CAG. They were called Delta Force back in the day, called Combat Acquisition.
They're called Delta Force. That doesn't technically exist, but everybody knows they exist.
Right. So that's all your tier 1. They're the tip of the spear. Your CTTs.
Navy SEAL type guys.
Navy SEAL has SEAL Team 6. That's their tier 1 element. Then you have tier 2. And this is where I start getting a little hazy who's in, who's not there anymore. Because I think Rangers moved into tier 2. They were tier 3. And now they're tier 2. I think that's what happened. That's outside after I left. So you have to forgive me. But like all your green team and then your special forces are definitely in that range. It's not their tier 1 elements in that regard, but they're all like elite warriors given a task, right? So they all have like pieces of the pie. Your special forces guys go out by themselves, work with indigenous forces, create army, a fighting force, and then fight using indigenous forces. That's their job. You have SEAL teams who do demolitions and water, a lot of your waterborne operations, and then they have their own specific missions. But a lot of things changed when we went into Iraq. Everyone started doing door kicking, and it became the thing that everyone started learning. Yeah. And they were focusing, I should say, not learning, because everyone does that. But you had this emergence of CTT operators who started becoming the SMEs and getting attached to all these special operations groups because of their specialty, which is being able to talk to what we call the cast. That's all the birds with the guns, and they bomb the hell out of places. So they started talking to them. And they are very good. They understand payloads, how much fuel, how long they can stay on station, what they can do, right? Capabilities. And those guys in a live firefight can call between you and me, strike, and be pinpoint accurate. There's a guy who holds the record for sending the most ordnance in a single firefight. He stayed up for like 4 or 5 days or something.
Holy shit.
It was incredible. They just kept feeding him water and stuff. It's crazy. Like combat operators are insane. I was never one of them. I was just a paratrooper. I was an infantryman. I did 3 years in theater, but 6 active in the United States military. So I did get to see a lot of combat. I got to see a lot of stuff going on. But a lot of my training, and something I did want to bring up is like, I have a video on my Instagram, and I keep it there. If you go through my Instagram, you see a lot of the mistakes, and I keep those there to like almost be like the Julius Caesar, the boy walking in the cart going, you're only a man. And it's real easy to put this persona out there and think that you're somebody. But when you post your mistakes, that's something I love. And I got that actually from a girl called Bonbon. She used to post all her mess ups. And she's Bonbon Guns or something like that. But she posted all her mess ups every time. She wasn't out there trying to look cool. She would actually make reels about how funny it looks, doing the thing, like putting a magazine in a magazine weld and fucking it up.
And then you drop it.
Right.
Dude, I've done that before. Like, you're 100% sure you slam the magazine home, and you shoot one round, and then the magazine comes out, and you're like, oh, in a real firefight, I just died.
But it happens to everyone. Everyone. But why do we put these personas on social media, these reels attributing to our awesomeness, when the reality is it's nowhere near what we actually are?
Yeah.
So I actually have a video of when I first got out of the military, and it's so bad. And when I mean bad, it's like cringeworthy. It's literally me in a close range. So automatically everything I would have gotten nowadays, knowing what I know, I would have got kicked out of the range for doing this. But it's a certified old school military tactic that I learned from the military. And now what we know, it's me switching primary to secondary drill. And what it means is primary is your carbine, secondary is your handgun, and you're going from your carbine, your rifle, into your rifle or your handgun. So one of the things is what they used to teach you is you throw your rifle around you and it slings around you and it hits your back, and then you put your gun out. That's the old method. It's garbage, and I have a video on there, and it's so bad. But that's what the common theme of this is to say, like, even me who got taught bad tactics, I stayed and kept learning and started learning from guys like Triple Feed and stuff like that. Started learning how to the modern day, the tier 1 way of actually transitioning from your primary to secondary.
Yeah.
Now we do this V method where we put our magazine out, and it's very controlled. It's very, you're not flagging your buddy.
Right.
And it's a more efficient way of doing it. But like if I'd have stayed going, I'm going to only be this person, and I'm going to take all the knowledge that I had from just this one event, I would stay stagnant and I would never have progressed.
Well, and the sad thing is, or the benefit of learning from those tier one guys is all of that knowledge, sadly, only comes from mistakes in wartime, right?
Yeah.
Like learning how to properly clear a building without shooting your partner in the back.
Yeah.
Sadly, that probably comes from somebody almost or actually shooting somebody in the back. And so when you can learn from these guys who have actually been there and done it, it's like, it's amazing that you can bring that knowledge into your work of protecting, high asset, high net worth people.
Well, it's funny to think about the type of guy, right, who goes into jiu-jitsu or they go into executive protection or any of these operating. They have a mindset, and that mindset is a warrior mindset. It says, I'm not afraid to look stupid in order to get proficient. What's that saying? Perfection is the death of progression. And I love that saying, because if you want to be perfect, then that's a goal unattainable. Yeah. You're never going to get better.
Yeah, our coach, Casey, in the 6 a.m. class, by the way. He's the best. Yeah. He frequently says, he's like, hey, just so you guys know, you're going to get your ass beat in here. Like, that's just the way. He's like, if you wanted to never lose a fight again, just always beat up 4-year-olds. Yeah. He's like, Scott, you could probably take down 90 to 100 4-year-olds before they overwhelmed you. You just be there fucking up 4-year-olds, right? He's like, but no, you're in here rolling with Tom Lawler, former UFC badass, and you're going to learn a lot more from that guy humbling you than just beating up a bunch of 4-year-olds. And it's a funny visual when I'm like, how many 4-year-olds could I take down
at least 9
before they overwhelmed me? Like, they're like gremlins, right? Like, eventually
at least after they've had their lunch, where they're all lethargic.
Oh, that's good stuff.
No, but you're right. It's the mindset. It's to go like, I am not afraid to get my butt kicked on the mat. I'm not afraid to say I sucked when I came out of the military. I'm not afraid to look stupid, to go to a day 1, week 1 pistol course, that .1 tactics puts on, and learn. Because humility is the empty vessel in which we can be poured in through knowledge. And through that, we are able to become what we want to be.
Oh, I love that. Say that again. Humility.
I can't remember. You'll have to read it back.
Man. Humility is the vessel to which we pour in knowledge. You said something like that. I'm going to have Chris clip that, because that was really good. That's going to sound really good on a reel. And then we'll also put in the mistake where you don't remember what the hell you said.
Like, I don't know. But the reality is that we, it's the Bruce Lee mantra, right? We can't be filled if we're already full. We have to be empty. We have to realize that we're idiots, and we are just a person going through the human experience. And if we give ourselves that allotment, then we're going to be able to grow. And that's one of the things is like, you and I are able to meet on a mat and go, all right, a purple belt's going to give some white belt a chance to roll, because he's now going to give him a chance to figure it out. And then at some point, okay, well, you did this right, you did this wrong. Well, now the next time I roll, and I don't do that thing wrong. And slowly but surely, I start sharpening my skill set. Now, you meet people with different skill sets. I was doing strongman stuff and weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting, and doing, rugby and all sorts of other stuff. It was like, I'm not the day 1, week 1 white belt that you're going to come across.
And now you look terrifying, bro.
So it's like, okay, now I have to deal with somebody who literally has a lot of strength. So now, as a purple belt, you don't come across that kind of person a lot. Now I gotta solve for X, right? So that also creates like, I don't know, like John Danaher says, you're presenting problems as you're solving problems. Yeah. And in fighting, in business, in everything that we do, entrepreneurship, it's the same. We are solving problems on the fly, right? As we're presenting them. So we are constantly evolving. And I love that. That's why I love being an entrepreneur. It's something that I could have easily slipped into some C-suite's position and been like, okay, and now I work for the man and I'm forever here and it's comfortable. When I have financial meetings every month with my controllers, I go, hey, this is going to be awesome and it's also going to suck. And I got to figure out how I'm trending and pull different levers as an COO, and I got to figure out how to make this thing work. And that's the joy. I think it was Alex. I forgot his last name. Alex. He's the guy who has the tape over his nose.
Hermosi.
Yeah, Hermosi. He says the reward for doing business well is that you get to keep doing business.
It's true.
And I love that. True. There is no end. There's no parade. There's no medal. You get to continue doing this thing. Yeah. And you have to understand that if you are continuing doing this thing, then you are succeeding. Right. And just like what we do, every time we show up on the mat or every time I go on to get to protect somebody, I'm still winning.
Yeah.
I'm getting out there and continue to do the thing I love doing.
So what did that transition look like? We're going to bounce around a lot, but what did that transition look like from like you're working on a team, you're working for somebody else, you're doing executive protection to you? I don't know if you started Charlie Mike Protective Services or if you bought it out, but like what was the position from you being like a grunt, right, in the executive protection industry to like, oh no, now I want to be an owner, entrepreneur. I have the mental chops to like run my own thing. What did that look like? Was it by accident?
No, it was definitely forged. It was forged through I don't know, like the fact that everyone was doing it horribly and just mad that everybody was not creating. Like I love Gary Vee. I love Simon Sinek. Like I love these guys that are all about like, let's solve for our clients. Let's treat our employees well and they will have retainability. Like I love those ideologies, and I brought those into my company when I started moving up the ranks. So I was brought in to Charlie Mike as a director of operations for Nevada.
Okay.
And I had some equity in Nevada. But the people that were running the company, my CFO and this guy who was a CEO, the CFO was only part-time at the point. He was funding the whole operation. But I got brought in for a big operation, and they were a mess. And I had come from Pinkerton, which was a huge big box.
Yeah, they're the 800-pound gorilla in the room.
They're
of executive
the SMEs.
protection.
Yeah, they're the oldest security firm in the United States. 271 years they've been in operation.
Holy shit!
Yeah, they protected Abraham Lincoln.
Whoops.
Yeah.
Didn't work out. I would put that on the resume.
Well, the fact is that by that time, the Secret Service had already become a thing, and they had modeled the Secret Service after what Alan Pinkerton was doing. And so if you don't know, Secret Service had taken what they do off of executive protection agents. So it's actually a more proficient world. I'm sure there's a lot of Secret Service guys who are like, meh, and they're probably not liking that. But EP is essentially.
I know one Secret Service guy who will never be able to be on the podcast because nothing he can talk about, he's allowed to talk about. No. But he now does executive protection. He's like, dude, it's slightly lower stakes because you're not as much in the public eye, and way better money.
Yep. Yeah, it's a little bit better. I never wanted to go down that route. My hat's off to law enforcement. You guys kill it every single day. It's a dangerous job. The politics surrounding that are horrible. Your chain of command never gives you enough training time. Yeah. I love that, like, we're seeing an influx of more law enforcement. You know Cam Cousins.
Yeah.
Love that dude. He's my rolling partner. He is also my shooting partner and just a friend of mine. That guy is scary.
Dude, Cam is... Okay, so I have an 8-year-old who's getting pretty proficient at jiu-jitsu, but he's still 8. I can throw him around like a rag doll. When I roll with Cam, he throws me around the way that I throw around my 8-year-old. I have like a pretty good north-south. For those that don't do jiu-jitsu, you basically like you're laying on a dude's face and chest, and I'm pretty good at holding that position from having a wrestling background. Cam is the only human being who has one arm bench pressed me off of him up into
not
the
today,
air.
Satan.
Yeah, not today, Satan. And then he literally like threw me halfway across the mat. I was like, oh, not on my best day could I submit this guy because he's proficient and he might be the strongest human being I've ever met.
He's 260 pounds. For those of you who don't know the individual we are talking about, he is a Metro police officer here in Las Vegas. He is 265 pounds of pure muscle. He looks like an anvil stacked on a bigger anvil. And he's the sweetest person. So when I met him, he was a purple belt in jiu-jitsu. He was a ADCC. He did wrestling. He did all sorts of crazy stuff. But at that point, now he's a brown belt and he's continued on. But he was starting to say, yeah, I shoot. Let's go shooting. So for a year, I was training for the tactical games, and I was trying to get as much shooting as possible. So every week I cut out the Postmates, I cut out the subscriptions, I only bought ammo. And I was like, at least once a week, if not 2 times a week, I'm going to go shooting and practice moving, shooting, barricades, all sorts of stuff. And I started this chat group on Instagram, much like our jiu-jitsu chat group, right? For only experienced shooters, because I needed people who could help me train, and they were not a safety violation, right? I didn't need to do a safety brief to make sure that they knew the rules of safety, keeping fingers off the triggers and know your foreground and your background and stuff like that. So Cam was one of the few people, coupled with my buddy Paul Chiappa, who's a tier 1 or a triple feed instructor now. Those are the only 2 guys consistently every Saturday or Sunday that would come out for years. it's now been like a year and a half, probably like 2 years now that we've been doing it. Every week we go out there. And Cam started out when we first started. He started doing his shooting, and he was pretty much, not to hate on him, but he was pretty much like every cop. He goes out for his qual, he got his thing, and
shoot once a quarter or something like that.
And he liked guns, he liked going after, but he'd never been around guys who it was their whole life, right?
Right.
Like we focus on the hard skills every week. Our whole life is dedicated to this progression. And Cam started becoming really good on the gun. He just went to Point One Tactics shooter course that Donovan was putting out in California, and it, like, just the progression that he's had while he's come over the last year. It's just been incredible to see. I was scared of him on the mat, but now I'm scared of him as a unit, right?
Yeah.
He's got all those skill sets now that have made him just a lethal human being. And you couple that with his incredible personality, just a nice dude, and you start finding out that like that is who you want to be in life. That's the kind of person you want to emulate. And you start seeing these people who are similar, whether they're on the jiu-jitsu mats or they're running their real estates or whatever they're getting into. They always have the same mindset. They have that kindness, but I'm also working on myself mentality.
Man, I love Cam to death. Like, it's been a pleasure getting to know him. And every time I think about him, it breaks my heart that he has to come hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month out of his own pocket to train jiu-jitsu, which makes him less lethal in a police situation, right? He can hold people down instead of having to go to the gun or the taser or whatever. And then the shooting and like all of the training that Cam's doing should be subsidized by the department. And
Correct.
It's just sad that police departments don't prioritize the training, because I think like a little bit of like compassion and self-work, which Cam does, right? So it's like, now you know how to de-escalate a situation. And then if it escalates, you can use your hands because you're not fearful of being able to hold a man down.
Right.
And then if it really escalates, you can use your firearm without hitting a pedestrian. And it's like, all of that stuff, that should just be part of police training, and it's not.
Absolutely. So we all know the defund the police thing.
Yeah.
And if you listen to any of people, I think it might have been Glover or it might have been Tim Kennedy, who was like, no, let's not defund them. Let's give them more.
Right.
I think it might have been Jocko. Jocko was saying, like, let's give them more.
Right.
Let's teach them. They're only getting 6 months in the academy, and they're coming out and expecting to deal with these hard situations that are traumatic to anybody. And now they don't have the departments are not giving them these resources. And that was one of the things that when I became a business owner into Charlie Mike, I started going, I want to change that.
Yeah.
I want to do that. So we pay our employees to go through our curriculum. It's all in-house. So we invest in our guys. We do everything from hostile terminations, workplace violence, executive protection. We'll work with your HR to come into your office, work with head of HR Desiree, and say, hey Desiree, we have a plan. What do they have for company property? We'll get that for you. We'll lay out a plan before we terminate them. We'll identify where their desk is at. We'll have clear lines of where to get them there, collect their stuff, and get them off property. When we have all of this years, unfortunately, and I use that word seldomly, but unfortunately, COVID created us the opportunity to get many reps on that front. So we created an in-house curriculum. So the reason why Charlie Mike is such a passion project for me is because I personally developed myself through, like Cam, through my own pocket. Started working to get there. I worked with many, many people trying to up my IQ on the skills and started developing myself. And I realized as I looked around that there were so many people who were trying to break into the industry, and they were taking these, courses, trying to better themselves. And I was thinking, well, why wouldn't that be something that we offer to people? Instead of charging people, why don't we just pay them to do that? And then do checkups, right? Benchmarks to make sure the absorption rate is there, so we can make sure that every step of the way they're understanding it. So we have this thing in Charlie Mike called the Charlie Mike Academy, and it's where we take a candidate like a Lance Corporal, fresh out of the Marine Corps, and through, we'll call it 3-5 years, right? get them to our special projects division. That's where we handle all the high threat, low vis stuff. And
this is like the really rich guy wants to walk through a casino and have a wild night, but he wants security type stuff.
Let's say we call special project. It's our catch-all for anything high threat. So it could be workplace violence. It could be hostile terminations. It could also be just executive driving, where you have somebody, who is a CEO or a C-suite individual of a Fortune 500 company coming in here to maybe go through CES.
Right.
And just needs a driver to get him from point A to point B while he has his meetings in the Suburban, or maybe when he just doesn't want to drive, right?
Right.
So we have somebody like that. So we have all of this curriculum in Charlie Mike to teach our guys. And that's one of the things that was a passion project for me, is like, let's of course get them the medical dental eye, get them a 401k. Let's get them a plan to retire. Let's of course do all that. But in addition, between getting out of the company, let's also motivate them with more than just money, because that's a lazy way of being a leader. Let's give them opportunities, and let's give them the ability to be trained, because guys like you and me get motivated by the idea of being better.
Yeah. And those are the people you want to attract to your company,
exactly. Right? So
can you give me an idea of like, how big is the actual market cap or market potential for executive protection? Because it blew my mind. We have another mutual friend who I can't say who it is because he's signed an NDA that does protection for exactly what you said, home protection. He runs the team for a Fortune 500 COO. And she's a big deal, makes absurd money, has had all kinds of death threats because of the area that her business is in. A lot of activists are against that business.
Right.
And so at any given time, it's her, a family, and two family members. At any given time, there's 2 security personnel on each family member, and there's a roving guard at the house. And if they travel, they've got 4 or 5 people. And so I was just kind of back of the napkin doing the math. And I told our mutual friend, I was like, wait a minute. I'm like, the company for this Fortune 500, just for this one employee's executive protection, they're dropping $4 or $5 million a year. And he's like, oh yeah, easy.
And
I'm like, oh, the market cap for this industry must be huge, but it's super quiet, right? Because like Bezos doesn't want to say, oh, Amazon's dropping $18 million a year for my personal security. Like, that kind of stuff doesn't play well in the media with the evil rich people.
Well, let's talk about that. So a CEO, the reason why they would need EP, right, executive protection, is because a lot of these guys have insurance policies on their person in case they need to account for their physical well-being. So I'll give you an example. You said Bezos, right? Bezos. I'm pretty sure that they have insurance on his life in case he goes down, because the company, if their CEO, their stocks would drop. All these things would start happening when that person undead themselves, right? Or unlife themselves, or whatever the thing we're supposed to say on social media, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever the insert in word here. That person would have, now that board of directors would have to have a consultant come in lieu of, who could stand in the stopgap and make sure that position was filled while they found somebody permanent. So that creates money. They have to have money set aside. And Charlie Mike, we're starting to figure that out, because if I lost, that opportunity to be breathing or my CFO, my company would be ruined like this. So companies pay for the insurance companies saying, no, you have to have armed security with you. You're too high net worth individual. We need to have a stopgap in between you and the potential of you losing, what's the terminology we're supposed to use?
It doesn't matter.
All right.
Losing life.
Losing life, right? We need to have the ability as an insurance company to say, hey, you had armed security, right? They have to have that. So they reach out to my community. And what I wanted to say on this podcast was to say that you have this 20-year gap just in the last 20 years of how the industry has changed. Before, it was all gray suit, super anonymous. Even guys like special operations guys, they didn't have any MySpace back then, right?
Right.
Facebook was the new thing. None of those guys. It was like a taboo thing to have social media.
Right.
Right. So nobody talked about this industry, and it was all, oh, I got a bunch of buddies who are Green Berets, I can help them do your thing. Now it's become commercialized, and now with the introduction of like your buddy Mike Glover and Tim Kennedy and all these other people who are special operations guys who have big social media presence. It's incredible. It's changed the industry.
Right.
And now you're starting to see an influx like my buddy Byron Rogers, who is actually creating podcasts surrounding this industry. And they're starting to actually start highlighting these things that you need in order to become there. Now it's being something that's ordinary people can accomplish. You can get there if you have hard work and you have the ability to absorb the curriculum. You have the ability to do the thing, and you work on yourself. You can do it if you need to.
So if you're comfortable, and you can tell me to piss off, give me the rundown of like the economics of somebody does, 6 years in a Ranger platoon. They come out, they do a couple years of the grunt work, right? The evening protection, they're taking the courses, they learn the dynamic driving. They, probably need to get a lot of training on like tactical awareness in a social situation instead of like a military situation. So I'm not talking about somebody green, but like somebody who's got a few years experience. Is this a $50,000, $100,000, a $200,000 career for these people? What does that look like?
That's a good question. So to understand the executive protection community, there are companies like EPI and Byron Rogers Legacy that teach people to be executive protection agents. And some of these companies are even allowing veterans to use their GI Bill to pay for it because it's
education.
It's an education. So there are a lot of people like Christian West and are like pioneering these educational processes to start getting these people down the road. But if you to your point, you've had your Ranger experience, you got out, now you're saying, hey, I want to do this. Well, the first step I would say to anybody who's trying to get in the career field, start with jiu-jitsu. Like straight up, you're going to need it. You're going to, like, law enforcement's figuring out they're needing it. That's why there's a bigger influx of law enforcement who are taking jiu-jitsu. And then definitely you're going to need it here because two things. A, you're going to learn to suck. You're going to have that mindset. So you're going to be a good teammate because you learn as in jiu-jitsu how to be a good role partner, right? Second thing you're going to learn is that you don't know everything and that how frail you are. If you go into a violent situation, prep for violence, you're going to get violence. If you go into a violent situation looking for the ways out of it, like every martial art says, the easiest way to keep from getting tapped is to run.
Right.
Hey, that's a pretty good thing to know. But if you're an executive protection agent, you should be looking through de-escalation or even better, situation awareness. If I see you running across the casino, that's an indicator that this is not in my environment that should be.
Yeah.
Right? That is an anomaly. I need to cue on that. I need to see where he's going and where my principal is at and see if that's going to be a problem for me. Officers are great, but they play defense. They're constantly looking for something to happen and then they react.
Yeah, because that's what police work is, right? Like there's no proactive police work going on in America anymore because they'll get sued.
Correct.
They'll hear from the NAACP, whatever. It's like you wait till somebody gets shot, stabbed, beat up, raped, whatever, and then you show up. And that's fine that's their job, but you guys are trying to prevent that long before it happens.
Right. I tell, and a lot of law enforcement have a hard time transferring over to what I do because they can't get around that. They'll see some guy committing a crime and they'll get scope sucked straight into that and they've left their principal because now they're still thinking like a cop instead of thinking like an executive protection agent. Not all, some, right? Yeah. Then you get some guys and most of the guys who are like ex-SWAT, who are like tactical minded, they have an easier transition period. But the fact is that they start seeing the problem before it becomes an issue and they start reacting. And jiu-jitsu helps with that. It's like, okay, I'm seeing the problems long down the line. And then the second thing I would say is start upping your gun skills. It's not the biggest thing you need, I would say, but it is a final thing you need. If everything goes wrong and you go to pull and you hit Nana instead of what you were hitting at, you're not only you're going to jail, but you're also getting sued. And then your client is also getting sued. Everything's gone to hell.
Yeah.
So you want to hit what you aim at. So that's a big determining factor. But the biggest component, the biggest thing that leads to success are a two-pronged. One would be your problem solving, right? The ability to problem solve because things always goes wrong. Murphy's Law always has a say in every operation. Every detail goes wrong. Nothing you plan is going to come out perfect. Your client's going to say it's only him, but now he's showing up with 18 girls and you only have 4 slots in your Suburban, you need a whole nother vehicle, right? So you're going to have to account for that. So having that good advance and being able to do that. So problem solving. We affectionately, and Charlie might call it FIFO. Figure it the fuck out.
There you go.
Yeah. It is the backbone. We have an official motto that says you don't pay for a service, you buy a result. But our unofficial motto is FIFO. And it's just because everything that we do in this in my company is figure it out. Like one of our core values is be empowered to make mistakes, but learn and grow. And I wrote that in there, my partners and I did, because I wanted that blue ocean strategy. I wanted them to come up with creative solutions and not nail them to the ground because they decided to think for themselves. Because if my mantra is to get that Lance Corporal to be working high threat in 3 to 5 years, I got to empower him. I got to give him the leeway as a leader to say, you can make mistakes, because we all make mistakes, whether it's on the mat or in life. And especially as an entrepreneur, you make a crap ton. Every day is a mistake.
Every day.
Right?
I made one about an hour before you got here. I sent an angry text that I should have just
right.
I should have wrote it and delete it, right?
Every time you respond in an emotion, it costs you.
Yeah.
And I always think that because I'm an emotional being.
Yeah.
But the problem solving, right? That is the biggest thing that you need in your playbook, but also hospitality. I cannot tell you how much that is important in executive protection. My favorite and best executive protection agent I've ever worked with, he did a bunch of other stuff, kicked in doors, he did a bunch of other stuff, but the biggest thing that helped him become the best EP agent I've ever seen, he worked in the restaurant industry.
Really?
He was a VP for Smashburger for operations for many, many years. He is incredible. And you look at him and you're just like, okay, there are a lot of killers walking around, but this guy, I'll give an example without talking about clients. We had a client, went great. It was here in Las Vegas. It was for a sports thing. And the whole team shook my hand. It was successful. We had a lot of things that go wrong, but we totally solved it, nailed it, right? They came over. I was AIC for that, and they shook my hand. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. All the team, right? We amazing. Good job. I look over to my right, and I see Matt Rogers getting hugged by the entire team. That's somebody who has that X factor, that hospitality, that ability to win you over. Because I often say, it's like when I talk to clients, is saying, you want to like the guy in the car that you're going to be in that metal cage with for 12 hours.
Right.
Like, that's the thing you want. You want to like them. You want to make sure that that person has that hospitality, because executive protection is more than just concierge with a gun. It is the ability to be your EA, your executive assistant, right? Your travel assistant, your scheduler. They make sure your dry clean is there. They make sure your car is on time. They make sure you're on time. They make sure all those little nuances that don't get antiquated on a bottom sheet, on a itemized on a sheet. They make sure all those things seamlessly happen. Mm-hmm. And so they're more than just there for your protection. They're there to make sure your whole world is put nicely in a pretty little package with a bow on it.
Yeah, and you're safe.
Yeah, and you're safe. Of course, that should always be the metric, right?
Yeah.
But if we can do that and add value.
Yeah.
Oh, now you're not a red-lined ledger. You're not on the red side. You're on the black, because now you're providing more than just that service.
Yeah.
Now you're integrated into their company.
I think I'm gonna have my executive assistant Annie start carrying a gun. Just be like, hey, you need to protect me and make sure my life goes smoothly. She might be against that, so we'll have to talk to her.
I will tell you, in our line of work, our biggest friends are the EAs. They're the ones that run the big cats whole life. They're the ones you need to be the nicest to. They're the ones that you gotta be having that good relationship. I cannot tell you how many details could have gone wrong that didn't, because they had a stellar EA.
Yeah.
I love them.
I remember I showed up, and I'll never forget this. My buddy Chad, he's got that X factor in concierge and customer service and whatnot. One of the best mortgage people I've ever met on a leadership side. I don't know if the guy can even spell mortgage. He can't put a mortgage together, but he's a good leader.
Yeah.
And I remember when he was recruiting me, he's like, "Hey man, you're going to land at the Phoenix airport and you're about 20 minutes away from the op center. I'll just get you an Uber." And I'm like, "All right, cool. Thanks for getting me an Uber, man. Save me $20 on this recruiting trip that I didn't really want to take." He ended up nailing me. I got into the Uber. When he ordered the Uber, he called him and he said, "I need you to go to 7-Eleven and get this guy 2 Diet Cokes," because he is a Diet Coke junkie. So I showed up, I got off the plane. Sure enough, I was kind of parched. And the guy's like, "Hey man, Chad wanted you to have a couple of cold Diet Cokes."
So cool.
I was like, motherfucker. I'm like, this guy got me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even need to see what's going on. This is the kind of guy that I want to work for, right?
Yeah.
And it's those little touches.
Yeah.
You know, it cost him $5 for the extra time for the Uber, and you know, he probably tipped him an extra $5 for the $10, right?
Yeah.
He made an impression. And like, how do you instill that in a guy that used to be, you know, a ruck-sacking, knuckle-dragging military dude?
Awesome question, because this goes to the heart of why Charlie and Mike Academy was culminated. From my own experience, we had this Force 500's client, all of the C-suite. We had this huge event. I can't tell you because I'm under an NDA for all that, but let's suffice it to say they were all somebody's.
Right.
Okay. And we had this guy who came from a background that was hard to deal with, and he had his old FBI badge, and it was a retirement badge. And everybody who I know who is a real FBI agent, they're incredible. By the way, HRT is incredible. Don't ever mess with those dudes.
HRT, is that the
hostage rescue team? They are tier 1, basically incumbent. And those guys, I ran they're
like the Navy SEALs of law enforcement,
right? Team 6 of law enforcement. Okay. They are incredible. But I had the pleasure of being in a course with 2 of them, and they made me look like I should have sold my gun, set it on fire, walked away, and said, "I don't know what I'm doing here." They showed up in their little fishing gear. They had these these UFP hoodies and long sleeves that were salmon color and teal, and they had their little gun belts and their little hiking shorts, and they just blew through everything and their shot groups were so pretty. It was a pleasure just to be there to watch them. But I digress. The fact is that you have people who are out there who are really good at their jobs, and then you have people who aren't good at their jobs, and they have 2 tactics. And the way that works is you can go in there and try to muscle your way, like this guy he's not really an FBI, but he worked with them and they gave him a badge and he had a retirement. And he went up during an advance, walked up to the girl over at the Wynn Casino, who is the head of concierge, and flashed his badge and says, "I need to have the keys on the room." Well, I don't know if you know that, but the Wynn doesn't give a flying fuck about you.
Right.
They are great at making sure their clients are taken care of. They don't care about you, who you think you are. If you are there, and by the way, that hotel is incredible to work for. They are some of the best when it comes down to concierge. Their in-house EP is incredible. The Wynn is just an incredible experience from start to finish. But if you go in there and try to muscle your way through, they don't care about you. They already work with, on a daily basis, so many whales, so many people, VIPs.
Yeah.
They don't care about your one VIP. They got 1,000 of them.
Right.
And they will accommodate you as best within the policies that they live. And so him flipping this badge, and he was like, "I need the room keys." And the lady looked at him and was like, "Respectfully, you're not on the room, and we're not going to give them to you. You can have the executive assistant call and get you on the room, and we'll be happy to afford those 2. And he came back to our little huddle outside in the valet, and he said, "Oh, I didn't get it." And I was like, "Well, did you ask?" And he's like, "I don't know what you're doing." And I said, "Stay here." And I went to the concierge, same lady. Her name is Bianca, I think it was her name, if I remember right. Head of concierge, head of that. And she was just incredible. And I walked up to her and I said, "Hey, was there a guy here? A little guy, flashed a badge probably." And she goes, "Yeah." I said, "I promise to never let him talk to you again. But if you could just, if I could call you and let you know when we're arriving so that maybe you could have a lane open for us." And help expedite his being in this registration area and help him get him locked out to our locked out elevators, that would be great. She started laughing. She goes, absolutely, that's too easy. Here's my number. Let me know if there's anything you guys need. And do you guys need to be on the floor? And we're like, that would be awesome. And it was like sold out. She moved things around, totally took care of us. But it's how you approach.
Because some of a lot of the people who you guys are protecting, they're going to get mauled in the registration area by people who want autographs and selfies and blah, 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 blah. Because, I mean, these are big boy public figures.
Correct. Some of them are Sandeep, Patel, and you don't know him from a bottle of water.
Right.
And you don't know that he's a CEO for one of the largest companies, but he just so happens to have an Indian name, and they never know. You could walk out in public and they'll never even know.
Right.
You'll only be able to see because you got big guys walking around in suits and trying to find them. But some of them, yeah, you're right. They are public figures. They're sometimes they're 7 foot tall because they work in a certain industry, right?
Right.
And so they're very identifiable. Yeah. So absolutely. So you don't want them out there in the exposed, in the open. You want to get them in, get them out, preferably locked out, back of the house stuff, elevators. And that's one of the things I love about the Wynn, as well as some other Las Vegas casinos, is if you work with them and you go and set up your detail, which we teach all in our curriculum, right? Hey, a kind word and a smile gets really far. And also prep work, right? Go in and talk to the director of security, their guy. Hey, before I reach in your fridge, I need to ask permission.
Right.
Hey, we're going to be here from this date. What are the things we need to be aware of? We coordinate with their SRT. We give pictures to their surveillance team so they know that they don't have to, when the eye in the sky looks down and sees a bunch of guys in suits who look, formidable.
Right.
They don't flag us and stop us. So now everyone knows, and even if you don't know, the casinos have undercovers that walk around. So they will make your time there seamless. This is one of the reasons why I like working in the Wynn, is like from start to finish, every time I work a detail there, their whole team is just on par. They even have an in-house executive protection team that'll help you. It's incredible. So,
I remember one time I was playing poker at the Wynn. In my 20s, I had a bunch of friends that were pro poker players. So we were up here from LA, once a month. And I was sitting at the Wynn playing probably 3 o'clock in the morning. And in walks Mike Tyson with 4 executive protection guys. And I was kind of ignorant and dumb back then. And I asked the dealer, I was like, why the fuck does Mike Tyson need a bunch of security? He's like,
do you know why?
Yeah. He's like, they're not there to protect Mike Tyson from you. They're there to protect you from Mike Tyson. Right. Because so many people will rush him trying to get a selfie, and he freaks out and he's knocked the fuck out of a bunch of people.
That's one. That's definitely a big. I'm glad you understand the nuances that shows your IQ on this. But some of the other things is I can go hands-on to somebody. And because I have liability insurance and I could prove to the state that I did everything within the curriculum and following the NRS, the Nevada, I should know this as an owner, Nevada
some regulation
statutes, regulation statutes, and specifically the 200s and whatnot, they deal with the laws concerning security and what I can and can't do. And because I have curriculum, and I've been trained that I have followed the use of force mandates given to me by the Nevada state, and I kept within them. Then when I get sued, I can just display all that, and then it goes away because I showed that I properly followed what I needed to do to get there. And because I'm a subject matter expert in the field, I can say I had to skip 1 through 5 because of the time frame, and I moved immediately into this step. And I can articulate that in the court of law. You get Mike Tyson on there. We also saw that video where he punched somebody in the airplane.
Yeah,
and
that cost him a couple million bucks.
It probably cost him a lot. And I'll be honest with you, that he was not at fault. That person antagonized him.
That dude was a fucking douche,
an asshole. He tried so hard to get a reaction and you're in a fuselage with this person for many, many hours. I'm sure that wasn't the whole video. From what we just saw, you have somebody physically accosting Mike Tyson.
Yeah, and one of the worst decisions ever.
Iron Mike, right? And you have this guy who's an Iron Mike. I love that dude. He de-escalated it. He moved on. He tried to, and he finally had enough. And that is something that an EP agent would be able to step in and take care of for him.
Yeah.
Oftentimes by taking them off to the side, making sure that they work with the entire fuselage. If we were on that flight, we'd be able to identify that person. We would know where the air marshal's at. We would also know what the names of everybody who's working. Hey, Sally, can you do me a favor? Can you reseat this guy? He's causing problems for my client.
Yeah.
And they would seat us within a line of sight of our client, so we would be effective if anything like that. They would have never been able to get a hold of Mike because we would have been surrounding him and been able to take control of that aircraft.
Yeah.
So it's there are so many things that we do as executive protection agents that protect our clients. And one of the things is education, right? When we talk to clients, they go, are you guys just going to follow me around? And it's like, no, we're here to do more than just that.
Yeah.
You know, I have an EP agent who I know, he's really good at his job. He talked to me about a story where part of his detail was his principal would be in his office, much like this. He would have an office, but it was right off of, it was like an addition, right? And in between the addition was the laundry room. And so part of our training it's called cover for action, right? We'll sometimes inject ourselves into a position where we now perform a mundane task so that we have reason for being there. So a cover for action, right? I need to make sure my principal is safe, so I do something that will cause it. If I'm at a bar, maybe I'll order a drink so I can be close to my principal and overhear the conversation he's having with somebody who's visibly becoming agitated. Maybe that's cover for action. But my buddy, Matt Hollins, he said that every time his principal was in the office, he would fold laundry with the housekeeping. He would sit there and just fold laundry all day while they were in the office. Why? He was using that as an opportunity to protect him and also providing service.
Yeah.
Adding value.
I remember one time I was at a casino, this is years ago, and Evander Holyfield was having lunch with you could tell it was a bunch of business partners. It was a business card. I'm a huge Evander Holyfield fan, huge boxing fan. Right? Yeah. I boxed for like 10 years. And so I was trying to be respectful until his lunch was over to go up and try to get a selfie and say how much I appreciated his career and whatnot. So as he stood up, I must have stood up a little bit aggressively and made a line for him. And all of a sudden, these three dudes at the table next to him stood up, and I was like, oh, fuck, no. Like, not only do I not want to get my ass beat by Evander, like, I know what you three guys are doing. I'm like, I'm just a fan. And then they were super cool. And like, two of them sat down. One of them came up. He's like, oh, Evander's real happy of his fans. Let me have him get a picture with you. And then he took a picture with all of us. He was cool. Yeah. But it was very clear that these guys were, subtly positioned, again, having lunch within, an arm's reach of them. And I didn't notice them until they got up to fuck me up in case I was trying to fuck Evander
Just
up.
Like a fun fact, I maybe had at the table with my principal, I maybe had dinner maybe twice. Like, it was an absolute, because it goes against everything. We need line of sight. We need to be away from the client. We need to give them his space, because our whole job is to provide protection while maintaining your anonymity. Like, you need to be able to be a person, right? We provide that ability for you to be a human being while still maintaining your security. So to at that point where that EA was asking, you're not going to be on him, right? You're not going to be every day. No, we allow the guy some life so he can live his life and be safe doing it, so he can be oblivious. And we all seen that meme where the girl's like la 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 rocking into Target and saying, I'm gonna get some towels and this is gonna be great, and the guy gets out walking in the same parking lot right next to her and he goes, all right, I'm looking for exits. That guy looks suspect, and that guy might have a gun. You know what I mean? Because that's what it is. Right. We're doing that for our clients. But to your point, when you're talking about where those guys were positioned, and what I wanted to touch on was the fact that EP agent that went to you and talked to you about, oh, he's cool or whatnot. One of the things that we do in executive protection is we get with our clients and say, how are you? Like, what do you like fans? Do you only like certain people? Like, what I've heard is, Schwarzenegger will only do 30 minutes or 50 photos. Like, that's his thing, right? That is the only thing. He'll get in, get out. He was never my client, so I can say his name. Right. But that's what I've heard. There are some people that will not do photos. They will not do it. They don't want to shake hands. They don't do step and repeats. They don't do any of that stuff. And then you have some of my favorite people who I've had the fortune of protecting, who said, I'm only in this position because of the fans, and I will stay here as long as they need to. And I know rodeo guys that I protected that were that way. I know big time artists that were that way. You know, they're on the top charts and they're like, no, I'm here because of the fans. I'm nobody. If I didn't have the music and nobody liked my records, I wouldn't be standing here. So I'm going to do that. And it's so cool to meet those people.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like an honor to be, because you're like, oh, you're the salt of the earth. I need to make sure that you get back to your family alive. And it's such an honor. And I'll be honest with you. I came out of certain big box companies and got a little disheartened by the industry, which led me to Charlie Mike. And just everybody out for themselves. They don't take care of their employees. They have this what they call Apache Warhorse syndrome, where they take their best guys and they ride them into the ground until they die, and then they cast them away. And I hated that. And I wanted just to create an environment where I would be able to keep guys, have them do this thing we love, and be able to retire out of it. That's my mantra. That's the thing I want. And one of the things that happened was I left that big box organization, and I took this detail, and I was running it. I was AIC, and it was
what's AIC mean?
Agent in charge.
Okay,
yeah, asshole in charge. Right?
Just figured it out. Asshole in charge. There you go. Perfect.
Right. And I took this job. I was AIC. I ran this principal, and I didn't know if the threat was credible or not. But that's not my job. I'm not there to determine whether or not you have a credible threat or not. That is not my job. I get called in, and my job is to protect you against everybody. And everybody in this United States has the right to feel safe. And if you want to pay for it, I will be there. And I'm not political. I'm not red. I'm not blue. I'm green. You pay me enough, I'll take care of you. And I protected both sides of the aisle. And every time somebody tries to snag me into a political belief, I'm like, no, I'm apolitical when it comes down to the job. I have my own personal beliefs and I'm very patriotic. I swear to defend this country against all enemies. I believe that now and as I did then, but when I'm on the job, none of that matters. It's about you getting home. Whatever your beliefs, whatever you do, there are a lot of people I protect that I don't necessarily in my private life respect, and I don't have to. I just have to make sure I provide the same professionalism every step of the way. And so when I transitioned from that big box organization, I took this job, and this is what made me love executive protection again. And it really set the fire for where I went. And the fact is, I took this job. This girl was actively getting abducted, and they were trying to find her. She had a lot of means, like a lot of money. They had made a couple attempts. When I got on there, we were swapping out cars every 3 days. We were using Toro, right? I was taking different routes home. We were using Faraday bags. We were using like all sorts of stuff. Like I was making sure nothing went into the GPS. I was doing everything to negate this fact. This girl did not leave her house for months until she called us. And she was afraid to go back to work, and her business was suffering because of it.
Obviously.
So when she got on, I think I was in week 2 after this lady, after I've been driving her around and helping her take care of her affairs, she started crying in the back. And I pulled off and I said, "Ma'am, are you okay? Do you need anything?" And she goes, "I'm just so happy you're here, Joey. I've been so scared and I feel so safe." And it broke my heart because now I've forgotten the human aspect,
right?
This thing that we do. And it's something that I hadn't felt since I was in the military, something real that I believe in, that I do when I'm clocking in. The reason I get up in the morning, one more hour on the mat, one more, mile on the treadmill, that thing that I perfected my warrior spirit for, the human component. That woman it's been scared legitimately, and she had credible threat.
Yeah.
And I gave that back to her. And it's an incredible feeling to be entrusted by my clients with everything they have, their loved ones, their dog, their car. I was driving around.
Their kids,
right?
Yeah.
Like this incredible honor it is to do this thing that I love doing. And I had forgotten all that because I had been so run down. So when I went into Charlie Mike, I took that with me, that passion to go, I'm going to create better executive protection agents by infusing not only training, but also giving them a plan to be able to get out and retire. Because some of us, we stay a little long in the tooth,
Right.
And then age starts creeping up on us, start getting a little more gray in our beards, and, and
age is undefeated.
Right. Yeah, it's the ultimate. That's the ultimate coral belt right there.
Right.
But what ends up happening is I end up going in there and I go, okay, I want to not only have this training, but I also want to have human beings that are able to be better in life and to be able to have something they believe in. And so when I created this mindset, I brought that coupled with one thing that I'm very proud of. And I actually got to meet him the other day at ADCC. I had, of course, read Jocko's Extreme Ownership, right? Everyone has. It's phenomenon, echelon front. It's blew up. But at a critical time during that transition phase, I read Extreme Ownership and then again, Dichotomy of Leadership. And I started making Charlie Mike, every new employee has to read Extreme Ownership within the 30 days of employment. And then we sit down with them and talk about the principles. In this new generation that is coming up, a lot of the things that we as the old gatekeepers haven't had, right? They don't have a lot of things that we had growing up, or at least a different experience in the humanistic journey. And a way to infuse that was I started seeing, we started seeing quiet quitting, right? That's a thing that's common culture. Everyone's talking about like, well, it's not me, it's Johnny over there, and I didn't get the information, and so I said, you know what? I'm just gonna make everyone read Extreme Ownership, because now as a business owner, I can say, well, you can't tell me why you're late, because in Extreme Ownership, it talks about Jocko saying that he has an alarm, that he has a wind up, one that goes on the wall and one that goes on his phone. So, and you and I talked about it, the importance of having Extreme Ownership. So why are you giving me excuses and not deliverables? So when I said you buy a result, that's what I talk about. I talk about the fact that we don't have excuses. When we mess up, we have deliverables. I'm not interested in putting milk back in a bottle. I'm interested only in making sure that milk doesn't spill again. Mm. And so when I go to clients, I can say, we all mess up. It's a human experience. But at 4 a.m, do you really want to hear excuses, or do you want to hear my plan of attack? We had an individual who violated one of our policies, and my client at 2 a.m. called me and it's like, hey, this happened. We need you to, are you aware of this? And I said, of course I am. Let me talk to my operations and get a fix on it. This guy, highly trained, made a bad decision, and we solved it. And I was able to go back to the client and say, hey, look, we already solved it. He's been removed from that site. He's getting written up. We are taking care of it. You'll never have to deal with him again. And at 2 a.m, that's the only thing he wanted to hear. Right. We've already backfilled him. He's no longer on site. He is there. And I have somebody quality. Yeah. Like, that's all he wants to hear. You don't want to hear I can't be our guy. Are you for real? Like, and so many people run their businesses like that. And the fact is like, nobody wants to hear why you fucked up. They want to hear your plan to make sure it never happens again. Yeah. So as a business owner.
Dude, I'll never forget this. I had a realtor just fucking chewing my head off. And some of it was her own insecurity. A lot of it because we screwed up the deal and we were trying to fix the deal. And, I just kept calling her and just kept taking shit. And I'm like, I promise you, we're going to get it done. The client's going to get in their house. You're going to get your check, everything. And then she got mad at me. Oh, you think it's just about the check? And I'm like, oh, I fucked up again. And, et cetera, et cetera. And then about a month later, she referred me another deal. Right. And I was like, I called her. And I know her name, but I won't say it on there. I called her and I was like, hey, Betsy, thank you for the referral. Right. You remember this is Scott Groves, right? The one who just fucked up that deal a month ago. You laid into me. Right. She's like, oh, no, I laid into you because you screwed up, but you took my call. Right. And you solved the problem, and the deal got closed. She's like, I'm still going to get mad if you fuck up, but I'm appreciative of the fact that you unfucked it. Yeah. And I was like, first of all, thank you for saying the word fuck, because I haven't heard that since the military, especially from a lady. Right. I haven't heard it. I'm like, and number two, like, that was cool, man. It was a big growth moment for me where it's like, even when you screw up, if you do the right thing by the client and keep talking to them and don't hide behind an email. Right. Because the times in my career where I've made it worse is somebody calls me, I send them the voicemail, and then I send them an email follow-up. And they're like, no, you can't do that. You can't deliver bad news via email. Pick up the phone like a man and call me. And I've done that more times than I care to admit, and it's an ongoing business lesson that I have to teach myself.
And you're talking ongoing. Entrepreneurship is ongoing. Like it's always perfecting the art of doing business. It's trying to be better, and you're never going to get there. It's not going to be something attainable. So you're just trying to do it the best way you can. And I'll be honest with you, I have this incredible CFO. Most partners always hate on the bean counters, right?
Right.
Not mine. I love him. He's incredible. His name is Travis Vanderloon. And the reason is he cares more about people than he does the bottom line. And when have you ever heard a CFO do that?
Zero.
It's always numbers and red and black, right? Whether it fits. Is this a line item or is this attributed to a detail? No, then it doesn't make sense. And I cannot tell you how passionate he is about, like I was on the way here talking about some of our curriculum, and he's just super behind me. He finds the money to try to train our guys because he knows that Ben and Jerry's mindset, you invest, that Gary Vee approach, you invest in your people, help them find their 5-year plan, and they will turn out to be a vendor for you down the line, or they'll be that one gatekeeper that gets you that one deal. You never know what it's going to be, because what it's going to end up happening is if you treat people right, they stay longer, and they end up having relationships that you come later that you have no idea how you affected. And one of my business partners here in Las Vegas, I worked for him. I started as an executive protection agent for him. And then when I left, I told him, I was like, hey, I know I'm doing this high level detail for you and I'm kind of letting you down. You're going to have to find somebody to replace me. But I got this really good, opportunity to turn into management, to learn the business side, and I need to take it. And it just so happened, it was like, it started working out because it led to different opportunities. And through COVID, I was on the operation side rather than being a grunt on the ground. I was still doing the Antifa riots and all that other stuff, but for another company. But I was able to learn the business and do executive protection. And he could have been a stopgap. He could have been like, no, F you're leaving me high and dry, but he didn't. He took care of his people. And I took that and it stayed in my noggin for many, many, many years. And now he's a business partner. When we moved from Arizona into Nevada to start doing executive protection, we took him on as a partner because he follows the same mantra. His core values are the same. We believe in our people.
And I got to imagine that's especially important in your business because, like we've already come across on this podcast, you can't advertise, hey, I executive protected XYZ. Hey,
right.
We had this type of situation and we solved it. Oh, hey, this guy got shot at or attacked by a drug dealer or whatever. And you can't disclose any of that.
No.
So everything in your business has to be referral, word of mouth, reputation.
Well, think about it further, because I've had to work with like SEOs, marketing, social media, how do you talk about a industry you can't talk about?
Right.
Because the easiest way is I worked for this person,
right,
and I did a great job, because that's what every other industry does, right?
Right.
Whether you're entertainment, my background is here and there, and I did this. I was over at Fox News, and I was an editor there. Now I moved to MGM, and I did their editing for all their social media. You know what I mean? Like that's how we tell each other we're good at our jobs, is we talk about our clients first, the people we work for. Now follow that all the way through and say, now you can't talk it because it's a violation of an NDA. Okay, well, how do I, as a business owner, how do I market that? Well, it's the main grasp of how Charlie Mike is solving that is through the talking points, things like this. Like I can be a talking head and talk about why persons need EP and what does it solve, and talk about the industry as a whole. Maybe not my clients, but I can definitely talk about the scenario without violating NDAs. Yeah. That's one scenario. And then also our training, that word of mouth is definitely right. But the ability, it's such a small network. What ends up happening is you find out there's only a couple people that do executive protection, by the way. There's a lot of wannabes, and then they're real people. And we'll get into legacy and EPI and all this other stuff. But I wanted to talk about like the people that do it now. There are people who are working their way up the food chain. Like I have a couple of buddies who are breaking in their ODA, and they got out of the special forces, and now they're trying to integrate, and they're doing a fantastic job. But they gotta start as a driver, and then move their way into maybe a regular. You're on the kids now, and now you're part of the big dog, but you're only there as his driver, or now you're 2IC. Yeah. So now they're trying to figure out how to get better in that vein. So they definitely they have this progression, right? But it's not clear cut. You have to work through it, and you have to be able to navigate those things. So I look at executive protection and how Charlie and Mike's solving that how do we get our content out there? How do we talk about this thing we can't talk about? And I go, okay, well, social media's got us very far, right?
Right.
We can put a video of me opening a door, and I never have to talk about clients.
Right.
I can also show you on the range and on the mat how I'm doing this thing, because the biggest thing to influence people is by first being that person. So I will tell you, I personally can tell everyone in my company, hey, you need to be training more. Why? Because every Saturday or Sunday, I'm on the range. You can find me like clockwork. I'll leave open mat at Hendo, go shower, put on my range clothes, and drag my poor little girlfriend out to the range and start hitting steel. And that's what it takes to be disciplined. So I can be first the person that heads it and be that leader, and then that will trickle down.
You know, it's funny you mentioned be that person. I remember going to, I won't use the company's name because the owner might not be happy of how this instructor started the class, but I went to this carbine class, and I'm much more comfortable with a carbine than a pistol, because to me, pistols are still dangerous, and you could shoot yourself in the leg and
you
stuff
also
like
got
that.
3 points of contact.
Yeah, it's like carbine's super easy, right? Yeah. And then 3 years in the military of like that's all we shot. You know, I don't think I ever shot. I think I shot a handgun one time in the Army, sure. and so I'm much more comfortable. So we go to like carbine 1, and I'm pretty like jeans, boots. Right. I've got the necessary belt, and there's these guys out there that are super Gucci'd out, right? You know, they got $500 tactical pants, but just about everybody except for me had their belly hanging over their belt. And the instructor goes, all right, motherfuckers. He's like, 25 burpees, and then try to draw your gun with your own foot. Yeah. And all of a sudden, you get anybody who thinks they're in shape, just make them do 25 burpees. Their heart rate went through the roof. Yep. And like, I was kind of scared to be on the line, because I'm like, one of these dudes is going to shoot me. You know, their heart rate's through, they're breathing, they're trying to pull their gun out. And I'm like, oh, dude, this is such a good lesson. Because these guys that are trying to be, you know, weekend warriors, or more like once a year warriors, they're not even in good enough physical shape to do 25 burpees and then shoot a target. And I was like, how embarrassing for them.
You're absolutely right. And one of the things that you talked to me, one of those requirements to being an EP, well, I retorted and said, the principal's got to like you, right? They have to trust you. There was this female that worked in, and I'll be honest with you, having a female in executive protection is like finding a Willy Wonka golden ticket. It is incredible. Shout out to Zoila Fausto. She was probably one of the first MMA people. I forgot did the MMA thing. She won the belt. She's incredible. She hurt herself, and then she moved into executive protection. And when that happened, it was a logical switch. And I've known her throughout this whole progression. She met her husband, all sorts of other stuff. So a lot of good things from that. But having a female on your team is so incredible, because there's so many good things. Females can get away with things that males can't. Stuff like if you start seeing somebody getting agitated, you send the girl in, and she is able to calm down a situation that maybe a guy would be agitating.
Right. I bet you she could have got those room keys from Beyond.
I'm pretty sure she could have, right?
Yeah.
Right? So having a female on your team has so many things. Like, I've been kicked off of details because I was a good-looking dude, and the guy didn't want me next to his wife. But if we had a female on the team, immediately, that is just an easy checkpoint.
Yeah, I don't want somebody like you hanging out with my wife.
Correct, right? No, and then none taken.
I'm not going to have a wife anymore.
Right?
Jesus.
Like not taken, right, at all. And we all, no matter how professional we are, no matter how many, like we have our own lives, we have our own things that we go back to, but there is that, right? There is that little scenario that plays out there, like, well, he's around this guy who I'm not, and that has that has its place. And it's really easy to have a female go in there and be like, okay, can you please protect, the kids or the wife, or maybe the CEO who is a female.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's the
you can't follow her into the bathroom.
Right.
Like at the Win, you need a female detail to follow her into the bathroom.
Correct. There's so many positives of having a female on a team. So many positives. And I've worked around some incredible ones. So like there's a couple in the like Lioness. She's the lion. What is her handle? Lioness Protection or something like. She runs handgun class or something. She's pretty prevalent in the space. But I will tell you, with just as many good people, there are bad people, and they get filtered out pretty quickly. A lot of people, we're a tight-knit group. We're a small community, so we end up knowing who the people who are not doing the job well and the people who are. And those people who are get called. Like, you wanted to know about how we get jobs as an EP agent. Well, it's because I worked as a driver and I did a good job. And now you get tasked by your buddy saying, hey, do you know anybody in Las Vegas or in Arizona, Scottsdale? Oh, yeah, my buddy owns Charlie Mike. Well, then they call me. I was on a range doing a low light class, and I got a phone call that I won't tell you who the client was, but let's just say everybody has her cosmetics. Everyone knows her from her TV shows and all that stuff. And we had to go take care of their family member and bring him. And I got a phone call, got to move, time to go. And in my company, we have a hot list, a WhatsApp chat or a Signal chat that we drop in, what they get paid, date and time, how long the duration, and say how many agents are needed. And
people just raise their hand.
Yeah, and the first served. So they get to take that. And I'll be honest with you, like, all those people in there have gone through our in-house executive protection course. They've already been blessed off on it. These are warriors. Some of these guys are instructors. Like, one of my guys is a triple feed instructor. He's incredible. And there is nobody better to protect you. But I will tell you, more than just the shooting aspect, you were talking about being physically fit, those guys with bump helmets and all that stuff.
Yeah.
How many people are going to trust you if you look like you get winded in an elevator?
Yeah, no chance.
They're not. I don't care what you think you know. I don't care what you think you have. If you do not have your $500 fitness and you only have $5 fitness, then it doesn't matter what Gucci gear you have or how long you've been doing it. I won't trust you, and the client won't trust you.
Right.
If you're a law enforcement guy who was, a SWAT commander and did all this crazy stuff, he was ex whatever, but what have you been doing in the last 5 years?
You're going to appreciate this. I have a mentor of mine. He was one of my best friend growing up, older dads, or one of his dads. He's become a really close friend of mine, mentor as I've gotten older. And he was a sheriff. He's retired now, so I can say this. He was a sheriff for LA County. And in LA County Sheriff, you do like a year or two in the jails and then like 2 to 3 years out in the field and then a year or two in the jails. And you just go back and forth because they do the jail detail. And he gets called in for this meeting in front of this like board of directors. And they're like, hey, there's, 4 floors, 3 shifts per floor. We've got 20 years of data. And your floor has less reporting on violent acts than we've had in the last 20 years or something like that. You're either beating up the inmates and not telling us about it to keep them in line, or you're lying and you guys just aren't reporting. And so he loses his mind. He calls his union rep. He brought in every one of the guys on his detail, and sure enough, every one of them looked like you.
Physically fit.
Every one of them, they started at 5. They would get there at 4 a.m. to lift weights and do physical fitness on their own time. And he's like, look at us and compare what we look like to the rest of these fucking scrubs and these fat 5'2" people that you allowed to be continuously employed by the sheriffs. And which one do you think the criminals are going to try to step up to, and have an ego with? And he's like, all we do is we're physically fit, we're bigger than them or as big as them, and we treat them with respect, and they treat us with respect. And it was like this whole internal affairs investigation, which he was completely cleared of. But I was like, oh, that's wild.
It's denying them the ability to do something. You're saying to that person, I make this my entire life. I spend Joey Pena, I go to the gym and power lift and do cardio in the morning. I eat clean all of my day. I go do jiu-jitsu for 2 hours every night. No ifs, ands, or buts. And on Saturday or Sunday, I shoot for about 4 hours. This is every day of my life. My whole entire life is I don't slack off. I have discipline in myself. So when I come up,
And you still have a hot girlfriend somehow.
I don't know. She found me. She's like, this is where I live now. So she's incredible. But the fact is that the not allowing them an inch is a great deterrent. And I'll be honest with you, there are many times I'll just get really close and I'll be like, "Hi, how are you?" And I smile but I'm in your space. Is there something I can help you with? Awesome. Well, the door is that way. Can I help you get there? No? Okay. Have a good day, sir. No. You have a good day. That whole exchange, I never had violence. I never threatened. I was overly communicative. Had a loud voice, smile, big voice, big hands, right? Yeah. But the fact is that at no point I had the threat because I looked like somebody who is now in your face and who is communicating with hospitality, right? Smile and is there something I can help you with? I'm denying them access. I'm closing it down. And just by my physical appearance, I'm also creating you this subconscious, I don't want to be messed with.
Right.
Right?
So how much of that when you're on like the executive protection detail, how much of is it you guys like, I don't know how to phrase this question, standing back, being humble, incognito, you can't be seen versus like, oh, we're going to let our physical presence be known to intimidate somebody who might be a problem?
That's such a good question. I love these questions you're throwing out. The biggest part is our job is to blend. I don't blend very well. I'm 6'2" and I weigh 250 pounds. I don't blend. Yeah. I look like a big dumb ape. But the fact is,
you look like you're doing executive protection.
Right? And the best ones don't. And I'll tell you, all tier 1 aspects, your CAG, your dev crew, all those guys, they're all like, on average, they're all like 5'9", 5'10".
Yeah.
They're not. Like one of my buddies who's a CAG guy, he's not, you would never know. You just think he's a Mexican dude. And
yeah, looks like a marathon runner.
He wears the cowboy hats every once in a while.
Yeah.
And you're totally the most lethal man on the planet. And you're just like, what the? And so to get back to on point is to say that executive protection is about blending. It's allow your client to be protected without invading their privacy.
Yeah.
Right? So you want to blend. But that also has determined by the situation. If we're keeping our head on a swivel, we're seeing something. I will tell you, I'm very close to the client when we're doing step and repeats, when they have to take pictures with their people, and they're like, "All right, we're doing like I'll just say any pop singer, Taylor Swift, right? Yeah. Let's say I'm protecting Taylor Swift. I've never protected her, so I'm not violating NDAs. But Taylor Swift, she stands there with the little pop-up, right? And she takes pictures with her fans, does a meet and greet in the beginning. She does this on every artist does, right? It's a requirement from the industry. Well, her EP stands really freaking close. Why? Because if they start seeing hands get handsy, start grabbing places, right, or maybe they want to do that person harm, they got to be right there.
Right.
So they got eyes, nothing else but those people that are really close to their client. So that has to determine with situation, right? Yeah.
What are the situations that are like super high risk? Because I think about going to a club. You're going. I remember this one night, Diplo or something was doing a music release party. We happened to be here for a mortgage conference. We knew a guy who knew a guy. We got a table right next to the DJ. It was awesome. Right. And now that I'm thinking back on that, if I was a big deal, right? If I was the guy who should have actually been able to afford that table next to the DJ, what a fucking nightmare for guys like you. There's thousands of people in there. People are doing all kinds of stuff in a club. Like drugs they're not supposed to, selling the drugs they're not supposed to, human trafficking, like all kinds of shit is going around. Yeah. So it's like, I'm guessing that's one of the more high risk, shit. It is a pain in the ass scenarios.
They also have like eye in the sky.
Yeah,
we integrate well with existing security. That's one of the biggest things. We may be the SMEs in our little field with
What's our SME mean?
Subject matter experts, right? Okay. So we may be the subject matter experts in that field, but it's still their house. We're there in their house, and they deal with this 100% of the time. That's why it's so good in what we teach in our academy at Charlie Mike is to say, hey, look, you need to go and do an advance and do a proper advance. Go to the club early. Talk to their head of security. Look at their exits, right? Is there medical on standby in case our client has a peanut allergy? It'd be really nice to defend against all things like guns and stuff, and then have him go down, but like because he was allergic to strawberries.
Right.
So maybe not have know your client's food allergies. That might be important to know, maybe just a little bit, and know where an EpiPen is. And you liaison with the house. This their fridge, man. You got to ask permission to go in there. So I make sure we train that in our EP agents so that when we go into situations like that we are successful. And that's all the prep work is the most important and fundamental, breeds the most fundamental success because of the fact that you're doing all the prep work.
If you're going with a principal to do 4 hours at the club or a sporting activity, they're going to the Raiders game or whatever, for that 4 hours on site, how much, besides the initial training, which is years,
right?
How much prep work is going into that one event? Liaisoning, getting there early, briefing the team,
right,
etc. Is it 2-to-1, 3-to-1, 10-to-1?
There's we had like 20 clients for this Super Bowl here in Las Vegas, and Las Vegas is so awesome because they are so well versed in what we do because they deal with this all day, every day. So they have accommodation. It's harder when you go into places like Cincinnati, Ohio, where they don't deal with things like that. Or even worse, you're going overseas, right? You're going, Oconee. Then it becomes infinitely. Now there's a language barrier. They don't know what you do.
You can't take your own firearms.
Right. You can't take firearms. So now you have people there who are assets on the ground, and all sorts of stuff start coming into play. They can get really complicated real quick. But to add to your question, we had set times prior to the Super Bowl. We go in liaison. They're very well versed in this. They know what we do. Here's your guy's seat. This is where he's going to be. This is the exit points. This is where you're going to park. This is where you will be, all that stuff. This is where, in case stuff goes on, to take them to.
Because you guys got to know everything.
Everything.
At what do they call it? Allegiant Stadium.
Yeah.
You got to know where the emergency exits are and the medical and the rally point, all the craziness, right?
Now think about this. White House implications. So as soon as the vice president shows up to any event,
throw out the first pitch or something.
Yeah, you're screwed. They lock down that area. It's now their house. You don't get to carry because no guns are, even if you've been vetted, they do a background on everybody.
Yeah.
So it gets infinite. That's a layer that every time something like, the vice president or the president's thinking about coming down to this event, we're like, there it goes. Yeah. Now everyone's got to get background by, their guys, by the Secret Service, and then it gets even more complex. So to just tell you your point, because they'll have a designated evac route for the pres or for the vice pres, and you'll have your own evac routes. And if they lock down stuff, they will say, screw you.
Yeah.
Screw your client.
Yeah.
I got the vice president of the United States. They're leaving first, believe me. So it gets complicated. It gets really complicated. But doing your homework, doing all that prep work, it's going to equal success, and something we teach in our curriculum. And it's definitely something that has led to me being successful in executive protection.
So what's the growth plan for Charlie Mike? What's on the 5-year horizon for you? Is this something you build up and sell to a bigger company, or do you want to just keep growing this organically? What's your mission?
So we started out in Arizona. We made a lot of mistakes. We worked through it. I came in, we revamped the entire company, and then we transitioned away from our CEO, bottom out, and then my CFO, my business partner, Nick Nation, who's a Navy SEAL, and myself all locked ourselves in a room, and we started hammering out the core values, what was important to us as a company, who we are. We had just gone through all sorts of stuff internally, and we were like, no, we need to do right. We need to plan this out. What is our plan? And we have what we call BHAGs, big, hairy ass goals, and we set them out for 10 years. What our 5-year plan looks like, 2-year plan, or 1-year plan. And we've been so successful that we took our 5-year plan and we already accomplished in the first year. So we actually have to go back in. When I go into Arizona again, I have to go back there and we have to lock ourselves in and say, we accomplished stuff that we thought we weren't going to accomplish, for 5 years in the first year. So now we need to set our goals even higher. So to add to your question, one of our BHAGs was move into Nevada. Well, we killed it in Nevada. We've already successful here. we have our business development, we have social media that we're working on. I'm working on my own podcast kind of deal for executive protection and things surrounding that. But then on top of that, we are in the process of moving into Colorado. So it's another state that we're collecting. And I actually have to go back and plan for what other states. So the idea is to grow it and get as many states as I can and start maybe buying business, start an acquisition phase, start going through, because I'm pretty good at going into companies and making them better. And coupled with the business practices my CFO has, we've just been a powerhouse. And then we have like really great people that I've worked for many, many years that are moving into areas that are great leaders. So it's easy to go, okay, get your license in the state, and now I'll make you the director of operations, and I'll just oversee all that. So to answer your question is, we're looking at more states to go into, maybe some business to acquire. We're also looking at, bringing on some much needed people that are going to help fill out our ranks. We've been running on a skeleton crew. We've been running with our hair on fire. So I'm actually looking on putting on another executive protection course, bring on more EP agents, start bringing on some administrative help. So yeah, just filling out that, and then possibly, spreading. Probably not going to go into California.
Yeah, too many regulations.
Too hard to do business there, but maybe, Texas or something, start moving in Tennessee. I have a buddy.
A lot of wealthy people in Utah.
Right. Utah is a great state. I have a lot of friends that, do security there, do executive protection there, and they're really good. So maybe partnering with them.
One of the questions I had, since you guys are focusing on Scottsdale primarily originally and now Vegas, so much tourism is, whether it's part of your business or maybe you like it better, do you guys do the full-time round-the-clock protection at their house? Like, hey, we've got a 4-year plan to be on this family? Or is it more like, hey, we're taking over for a weekend because you're coming into Vegas to go to the Super Bowl?
So both. We have both.
Okay.
And we don't just handle Scottsdale. We handle the entire state.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And that's important to know, because what's there, you have Sedona, right? You have Flagstaff, places that people go ski at the bowl. They'll go down to Sedona and want to have like a spiritual retreat or something. So much beauty in Arizona. So we cover the entire state. We'll send out agents that are highly skilled, highly trained, and they'll facilitate the whole state. But we have people that are, what you're talking about is your residential security team and your executive protection team, your travel team. And then you also have these, like here, this is a destination hotspot. So we'll spin up. If you want us to meet you pick you up, take you, make sure you have an EP agent 100% of the time while you're out here, doing whatever, right?
Right.
We'll keep you safe. We'll take care of it. We'll even help you plan your trip and then drop you off nicely back at the FOB or FBO and make sure you're good to go.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's end-to-end security, so it's really awesome. So my plan is to make sure that eventually, and you talked about, what the plan is. My 10-year, 20-year plan is to go international. That's why we don't have a CEO. We're probably not going to bring on a CEO until we have somebody who has international contacts who's going to help us get into that arena. It has always been, I traveled for 6 years all around Europe. I love Europe. I have friends that I affectionately call my European family, and I love them to death. I speak a little German and all this other stuff. It's just like my heart is European when it comes down to that. I love that area. So it's just like, for me personally, I would love to integrate a love that I had with my business and get that passion. So I would love to be like having off Charlie Mike Germany or Charlie Mike Belgium. That would be so awesome. Charlie Mike Norway, it would be dope. So that's kind of like where I'm kind of projecting. And one of our BHAGs, just as funny, is just to say, like, our old business partner wanted a plane, and I was like, it would be really cool just to have like a Charlie Mike plane, like a dedicated plane to be able to get our EP agents to go do stuff, or our clients to fly them in our own aircraft. So that's, as we look at the goals that scare us as entrepreneurs, setting those vision boards, those goals to be obtained, is like, dream big, let them scare you. And that's one that scares me, is international implications.
I love it, man. Anything that I forgot to ask you about executive protection where you're like, oh, this is a good story, or this is something that Scott forgot to ask?
Oh, you talked about like the threat matrix, right?
Yeah.
The things that are the hardest. It's actually not EP, executive protection, is it has its own threat, right? It's a lot of threat. There's some clients that are huge threats. Everyone doesn't like Bill Gates. I'm sure his whole client, Mark Zuckerberg, no one likes him. So yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of threat with that. But I will tell you the biggest things I've had that we became subject matter experts on was hostile terminations.
Really?
Yeah. They are the most scariest thing. You got a guy who has 19 years, about 1 year away from his pension, got caught doing something stupid. You don't think that guy wants to come back and shoot up the place? Screw you, Denise. I'm going to go in there and kill you at HR. And I've already said I'm going to cut the head off of everybody here. And that is scary. That's
a real threat.
People
go postal.
I will tell you, I won't tell you where it was, but it was, I won't tell you what building it was, but it was here in Las Vegas. I was just an EP agent at the time. I was AIC. And I was working for another company. I won't say who, but we had this guy. He was caught pleasuring himself late at night. He didn't know cameras had caught him. And he was 19. He was about 6 months away from his pension. Got caught. They flew him in, or they flew in the HR. He was high up on the ring. Just late at night, they caught him, said, terminated. You're done. Well, at the time, we didn't have policies in place. This is where that passion project came with doing in-house curriculum, because I was working for another company. They didn't teach people right. They definitely hamstrung the EP agents from doing anything important, right? So they had policies that the client could only talk to the sales guy or director, and then that guy would relay the information. There's so many channels, and it was so garbage. But the fact is that one of the things was they were waiting for this girl to come from the other side of the country to relieve this guy and to say, hey, you're being terminated. And we told them, that's risky. We need to do it now. They can do it on Teams for all I care. But why does that person need to be here? We need to do this. This guy he knew something was up, got called in early. He was agitated. We were in a glass box with this dude who was a big dude and pissed. And he knew he was getting the axe. So finally he gets up, takes off, leaves. So we never got to clean out his desk. We never got to do so all the things that we account for as doing hostile terminations, that my company became a subject matter expert, was born out of this one thing. And this is why we started becoming the subject matter, is because of this one detail. He left, which we never let him leave off site. And then we had to go back to his desk, itemize everything, videotape it. Hey, one thing, and the whole 9 yards for all legal purposes. We itemized it. And then we created a time frame for him the next day to come back on to get his stuff. Okay. So he had time to go home, think about it.
Yeah.
Say F you to the world, right?
Yeah, you don't know if he's coming back with a gun.
Right. Get freaking high on pills or whatever. Get sauced up, maybe punch a mirror, and then come back and get his stuff. And now I was a little bit smart about some stuff. I made sure he wasn't able to get on floor. I met him at the doors, and they were this reception area, and it was an elevator to go to the floors. So I met him in the reception area, and this reception area was all glass and mirrored, because Las Vegas, we have that mirror. So the fact that the sun won't hit the inside a glass fishbowl, right? So it rejects all that sunlight. So when you're looking in that area, you can't see anybody, but you can see out. So this guy signs for his stuff. He leaves, goes to his car, and I'm now walked to the doors, now looking at the outside of him in the parking lot. I can see him from probably from me to you, or me to the monkeys over there. And I'm sitting there looking at him. He throws his box, opens the passenger seat, throws his box, slings a rifle, an AK, racks it, and it's got his back to us. And I turned to my other EP agent at the time, and I said, the moment he turns around, I want you to draw fire, and I'm going to flank him. And he goes, yeah, he was a Green Beret. That's textbook 1 Alpha, right? Draw fire and then swag him, right? And flank. And in gunfighting, the number one rule is he who flanks first wins, right? Yeah. So that was textbook 1 Alpha. Draw fire and then go kill him. He sat there and he held his gun. And we were sitting there and we're waiting. I had my hand on my shirt ready to pull from appendix. And I got my other hand on the door. And he shakes his head, slings his rifle, throws it back in the car, gets in his car, and we never saw him again.
That guy has no idea how close he came to getting whacked.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been a fair fight. He wouldn't have seen us because we already knew. So we were just going to bust out, and they had pillars there in front. So we had already mapped out what we were going to do. It would have been a bad day. But I mean, the fact is, it would have been a bad day for everybody. And the fact is that we now have the ability to go, okay, now we have things. I learned a lot from that. Now we have things that we have in place so that never happens. That's what happens when you let HR try to run a termination. When you have subject matter experts who can come in there and say, okay, Denise, what we're going to do is we're going to have a meeting prior to the meeting. We're going to get all of your people on board. We're probably going to try to identify all of their company property so we have itemized so we don't lose anything, right? So if they have RFID tags, we can get that shut off so they don't have access. We can liaison with IT to shut down their computers. We can get all of that checkpoint before we walk into the meeting. And then we can say, all right, everybody on the same playbook? Awesome. Now at 1300, we're going to shut off all his access. So at 1300, I hear my beep, beep come off on my phone, and now she's reading him the bad news. Okay, sir, I apologize. Let's stand up. Let's go to your desk. You have 10 minutes to clear out your personal items. Here's your box. We stand there with you. They clear out your box. Do you have everything? At this point, you're not going to be allowed back in. Please make sure you have everything. Cool. We've already identified routes to get out that is less visible, which is the most important thing to the client. This incident doesn't want to be publicized. You don't want the rest of your employees seeing you terminate this dude and him yelling stuff or him throwing stuff or maybe kicking chairs or maybe, God forbid, hurting people on the way out, right? F you, Dylan. I never liked you anyway.
Fuck you. I hated accounting.
You're cool.
That's why I was jerking off on your computer to start with.
Right. So like having those evac routes, knowing those, identifying those, and then making sure that you then do perimeter. That's what happens is it turns into a perimeter security at that point. And then you've case closed. It's seamless, right? All integrated. Nobody gets hurt. This guy may have been thinking he was going to go in there and talk to Sally and punch her in the face, but now he's got two subject matter experts who are denying him the ability to hurt anybody, now taking care of all of the property and getting them off site seamlessly and without incident.
It's wild that I can only guess some of the high profile people you guys have done security for. It's wild that the one of the craziest stories you have is firing somebody. I would have never thought that that's a thing.
Well, I mean, promotions during COVID were running high. Like there was so much people, they didn't know, they couldn't leave their house. They couldn't know what they were doing, and companies were downsizing. So unfortunately, and I rarely use that word because I believe a lot of things are in our own control, but the fact is nobody accounted for a virus coming down and taking people's lives, and people got scared. And, you could say everything else about what's happening politically, but I won't get into that. I do want to say that the reality was it created for the security element to have to adapt because we weren't leaving with principals because everyone was staying in house, and companies were downsizing. So they needed to fire people. So a lot of the security that was happening during COVID were media protection. We were out there with news crews during the Antifa riots here in Las Vegas and in LA and stuff like that, protecting them while they're trying to interview people during that whole thing. That was huge. And then, layoffs, making sure that we were there to make sure we're taking care of poor Sally, who has to fire 200 people, making sure that went seamlessly.
Wow.
So that hands down, that's why I have a bucket where I take EP agents and I call it special projects. Special projects division only deals with high threat. Now, you talk about there are companies, medical companies, who will fire somebody on the phone because they have sales reps and they have all of this medical equipment, all of this crap, right? They got machines, they got credit cards, cars, all sorts of stuff. Some of our job is asset recovery. So we'll go in, they'll turn them on the phone, and we'll go in and itemize everything that they had that they sent us, make sure we recover all of it, and make sure it gets to the company.
Yeah, we've got a guy we do jiu-jitsu with who does medical device sales. Mm-hmm. And about every half hour when he's on the mat, he's got to go over to his phone to check to make sure nobody's going into surgery where he has to show up with the case of shit that's going to go into their body, a ball joint, a catheter or whatever. They're like high-end stuff, pacemakers and stuff. I mean, that guy's got $500,000 of equipment in his car that's paid for by the company.
Right.
So if they fire him over the phone without a plan, he could just, oh yeah, my car got in an accident and caught on fire, and that company's out $500,000 in product.
Think about the pharmaceuticals they carry. Like some of their Schedule 1 drugs that they're carrying or something, Schedule 2 or 3, right? That have to be identified. They have to be consolidated, check marked, saying, hey, I now have chain of custody on this and move there. So there's more than just credit cards and tires and stuff that the company owns. It's also like pharmaceuticals. So there's a lot of stuff that we do in special projects that are way more dangerous than an EP. Like EP, it's pretty controlled. Your guy is going to a known distance, and that's what executive protection is. It's just going from two known distance with an unknown in the middle.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just hard pointing at each one. And I'm going, okay, I'm going to get him there. Well, if I have a good plan, I account for most of the variables. I count for all of the stuff, like a car going down, somebody trying to attack my client, bad allergies, all of that stuff can be mitigated because I have all the time in the world. I don't have that when I'm doing a workplace violence. Now, Ricky from accounting has gotten pissed and said, I'm going to kill everyone in here next time I come in. Well, what do you do with that? This is a business that's got to stay open to the public, and you got employees that need to be safe while they're doing stuff. We've had people in banks, we'll say banks, needing to be safe. They, for whatever reason, they have a client who is allowed to be in the bank. They have an account, and until they close out that person's account, they have to follow protocol. Well, just because they got angry at somebody and threatened somebody, that may not be enough, according to the company, to get rid of their account. So they may have to bring in somebody like us to work with them for a couple months while they figure out, is this something that is going to go lethal, or is this something he's just blowing off a little steam? But until that time, they need people there.
Yeah, I was the only time I've been threatened with my life, maybe like 3 or 4 times. You talk about emotions are high.
Yeah.
You start telling somebody that like they can't pay their mortgage because they did something with their bank account that had them shut down their bank account. You'll get your check in 10 days. Yeah, I've been told multiple times, I'm going to kill you because, they're screaming at the teller. The 2 or 3 guys that are working in the office go over there to like make sure everything's okay, not knowing what the fuck I'm doing.
Right.
And this guy, whatever, his business, he has no cash flow for payroll or to pay his mortgage because he did something shady and they shut down his bank account.
Or he went in the negative and he just dropped his paycheck and they're thinking he's going to have enough. And now it's just accounting for all the things that he already overdraft and now pissed at you.
Yeah.
And I've been in that situation. I'm like, sir, I get it. Trust me, we've all been there.
Right.
That sucks. But the reality is you're yelling at Sally, who's 100 pounds, and she's a grandma, and she's just trying to do you the service and give you the right kind of service. And she's got a boss, and they have policies. Like, realize who you're yelling at. It's Nana. You're yelling at Nana. Stop yelling at Nana, right? So I have to be there to have those conversations and be like, hey, why don't you do me a favor? Why don't you come outside with me? Let's talk about it. And then he can scream at me all day while he's off property.
Yeah.
Right? All day. I'll be the punching bag. You can give it to me. Tell me what's wrong. And then we use our de-escalation tactics, and we're really good at it. So it allows us to make those transitions and allow our client, the bank, to save face. We're the bad guys.
I'll never forget. I just want to tell this story because I want to tell this story. It has nothing to do with executive protection. But I had this client long ago, and I ended up not closing the loan for him, so I don't care. I don't have any fiduciary responsibility to this guy. But I remember we were trying to do a loan for him. He was a big deal. He was like a hedge fund manager, about 5'3".
Mm-hmm.
Just I could tell from the beginning he was a total prick. and I'm asking him. I'm like, hey man, we need your divorce decree because you qualify all day long.
Right.
I don't care if you're paying $20,000 in alimony. You're fine, but I need to see the divorce decree to see what your obligations are to your ex. Wouldn't send it. Finally sent it over. And, we have to read the whole thing because we got to see what his assets look like. And as I'm going through it, it's like, he was the respondent. The wife was the petitioner. And in the divorce decree, it was no unsupervised visits with your minor daughter because of inappropriate blah, 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 blah. So the guy was basically a fucking pedophile.
Right.
So now I tell my boss, I'm like, I'm not doing this loan.
Right.
If you want it, take it to closing. And I remember my old boss was on the phone with him, and this guy was railing into him, motherfucker, you don't know me, blah, 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 blah. And my boss at the time, he's like, hey, Scott's not going to talk to you again. You can either talk to me like a gentleman and we'll try to get this across the finish line because I don't care what happens in your personal life. That's for the courts to decide. Or I'll come down there and talk to you like a man, but I just want to let you know I was a lineman for USC. I'm 6 foot, 300 pounds, 6'7", 300 pounds. If I come down there, I'm going to fuck you up if you keep talking to me like this. And then the guy was super nice, right?
Yeah,
and then all of a sudden everything went super smooth. And I ended up finding out later that it was some vicious stuff that his ex was doing to just try to not allow him to get access to his child. So I did have a soft spot in my heart for that guy after I knew the whole story.
Right.
But it was just funny. Like all of a sudden a really big dude interjects themselves into the situation and the tone went down.
That's why I do my meetings in person. You want cool. We have a problem. I'm going to put that personal touch on it because you can be a weekend keyboard warrior all day long, but why don't you come over here and say that? Come over to me and tell me in my face because I want to make sure you look at me in the eyeball when you tell me to go fuck myself. Right. And that's one of those things. It's like if you ever been in positions where you're around people who are like lions, they're real scary people. They're some of the nicest people. They don't have to do anything. They can just talk to you very nicely, but they're 2 inches from you and 6 foot, whatever. You're going to have a better tone than what you were saying prior to being on the phone.
Right.
It's that disconnect. And it's just like, wow, dude, it would have been just so much easier if you just treat everyone with respect. Just treat people with respect. I get it. That guy, he's going, my ex is doing a bunch of stuff. We've all been there, there's all sorts of stuff. They're just being malicious or whatever. But I never got to be sympathetic because you were too busy trying to be an asshole. Right. I never got to that human emotion. And that could have been talked way sooner than this point if you just came with some respect.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things that's like, I have to make sure I integrate to all my agents is saying, like, if you treat people with respect, even if they don't get back to you, other people see it.
Yeah.
And you're supposed to be the professional in the room. You're the guy getting paid a lot of money to be here. You don't have the luxury to have emotions. Every time you react emotionally, it costs you. It costs you. You might as well just pay out to them for that one quip. Was it good? Did it feel good? Good job. Because it now cost you your business. It cost you your job. It cost you that person ever speaking to you again. Or maybe you just slightly made your boss feel like he can trust you. And that's not when in an industry that's so competitive, your reputation is everything. And if that gets nailed, then you don't have anything. Then the phone stop ringing, people stop using you. People stop trying to want to do business with you. So it's so important to be this person, do business right, to talk to people with respect, to make sure that these people that you're integrating with it's not always just the person. It's everyone around you. And when you react emotionally, you're the one that ultimately pays for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's heavy. But
that's a good way to end a podcast, man. I've got 2 questions I always ask. We're recording this a little bit early, so this will probably come out like summer of 2024 because we're ahead of schedule. But, looking into the second half of 2024, knowing that you've already accomplished a bunch of your BHAGs, what are you most looking forward to, either personally or professionally, the second half of the year? And then what's your favorite movie and why? Because I'm a huge movie junkie, so I feel like I can learn a lot about people when I talk about their favorite movie. But favorite movie and why? And then what are you looking forward to towards the second half of 2024?
Awesome questions. That's pretty awesome to end that way. I would definitely say that, I'm trying to buy a house. It's hard in this market. Everything's going crazy. I think that's the benchmark for everybody, is everyone's trying to get a little something for themselves. But as far as like something personally for me, I'm actually going to be competing in my first jiu-jitsu competition.
Nice.
And that's going to be a big one for me. Testing who you are as a person is always good for your warrior spirit. So I'm old now. I'm probably going to be a master's 2 or whatever it is. So it's like, it's pretty daunting to be your first time at bat to, go against people that could potentially take your head off. And then favorite movie, I think I already said it was 13 Hours in Benghazi. Not only is it an incredible movie of a real, true event that happened, but it also, at the end of the movie, they have all the people they were playing, all the people they were acting as. And some of these people, and every year when Benghazi comes around, I always post the same one. You'll see it on my Instagram because they are my heroes. Those guys are my heroes. And that whole incident, if you remember, the Clintons brushed that under. Hillary had done a bunch of stuff with they had removed the budget from all of these sites. They were using all the military funding they were pulling from these guys. If you remember the movie, if you remember what was happening is they had taken this ambassador and they sent him to a very bad place, and he didn't even have proper real protection. They assigned 2 guys with maybe 6 years of experience between them to protect this person, and it went wrong, horribly wrong. And it wasn't these studs over the GRS working for the company were the only reason those guys got out alive. The ambassador died as a cause, but it was directly related to the politics that were happening. And it's so sad. But one of the biggest things about it, and why it's my favorite movie, is the fact that when all the GWAT veterans got out, we all had this passion. We signed because somebody threatened our country. We signed because we were intending to go to war. And for me, I spent 3 years in theater, doing the thing. And what ended up happening is we all got out and our country changed. Our country, the way they dealt with people, some things for the better, like our VA slowly, and shout out to all the VA employees. I know we as veterans are a handful and we usually yell at you, but it's not your fault. You're just trying to do the best. And then I say that with the bottom of my heart. But the fact is like it's a government run something, and anytime government touches something, it fails. So the fact is that all of us veterans, we all got out with this mentality. But the one thing that we had when we joined was we truly believed that we held our hand and said, I will defend this country against all enemies, both foreign and domestic. And we pledged our ever-dying souls to that allegiance. And that doesn't go away when we take off the uniform. It is instilled in us, especially my generation. My generation knew that it was branded in our hearts, on the back of our eyelids, and we knew that it was the very soul that keeps us going. And now you have a couple of guys who also exhibited that same mentality, who shouldn't have been there, who didn't have to, were giving up everything from food out of their kids' mouths. The one guy was trying to, in a bad market, try to be do mortgages and stuff like that. He was just going back to what he knew, running a gun. And you had so many people who didn't have to, and some of them paid the ultimate price. And for me, as a patriot, whether you're standing with a gun, donning the fatigues, or serving, in our United States military, that doesn't end. And those heroes are the reason I love that movie so much, is because they exhibited the true reason for being a patriot. And it doesn't stop when you stop being in the military.
Love it, man. So we're going to have you back on when you buy your jet. And congrats on all the success, man. And I'll see you in about 48 hours on the mat, which is always terrifying.
Yeah, I'll definitely be there on Sunday. I love Casey. I love 10th Planet for the fact that they do that open mat. It's where all the monsters come to show their stuff.
All right, man. We'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Thanks.